That's right, fellow racers. We have found the way from the fixed low downforce setting for the Corvette C7 DP to something that we have gotten much more comfortable racing. So, how's it going, everybody? And welcome back to part 4 of the setup process tutorial series. And essentially what we've done is like I said, we had started off with the low downforce fixed setup baseline from iRacing, and we started off with that, and over the past couple of days we have gone through the car, through all the different settings, and using a process that we outlined in the first tutorial, and we have slowly made a lot of progress with the car to make it more comfortable, more fun, and to drive and to produce better lap times. And so what we're doing now is one of the final steps we're going to do today is going to go into the car and really try to find the last bit of speed that we can tune into the car so we can go out and start getting comfortable with what we've developed and get as much speed from that aspect of the driver's seat. And then, as I had said from the beginning of this tutorial series, is that if you think of a clock, the setup process is a circular process, and the beginning sections of the clock, say like from 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, are the basic fundamental settings that set up the foundation of the chassis settings, and this is basically the foundation of the setup of the car. The big stuff: ride heights, springs, make sure you get 50-50 shocks to start out with, middle of the road ARB settings, and your baseline tire pressures, and those kind of things. And then as you get over to 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, further along that process, you start getting into, hey, let's start tuning some dampers. Let's start figuring out some tow issues. Let's start looking at caster and all the more fine details of the options that we have available to tuning the setup overall in the car. And so what we're doing today is going to finish up that process. So I'm going to bring up, get rid of that, and here we have some Motec. Okay, so one of the things that my OCD wasn't going to let me take care of was how we start getting, where did that thing go? Is this it? No, that ain't it. Is how we go from a differential that really hasn't been tuned properly to actually doing so. And one of the things that I wanted to do, that I said in the initial process of setting up your telemetry project with the differential aspects of that project that I found in a Project Cars forum, was to find a baseline for when the differential should be unlocked. Like what is a baseline acceptable amount of difference between how fast the left rear is rotating versus the right rear rotating. And what I said the process started out as being is you go to the track that you're going to be racing and you set up the track for a test session with the most grip available in the track. So how do you do that? Well, you go in and you set the coldest temperatures, the coldest air temperatures. You set the coldest sky that you can find. Overcast is going to be the coldest because it keeps the sun out the most. And you take away all the humidity, you take away all the wind, you take away all of the track buildup. So you start the track state perfectly clean racetrack. So you end up with the track in a state that is going to produce the most amount of grip for the car. So you get all your basic foundational stuff set up, and then you go into the differential, and this is what you're going to be looking at. You're going to take your clutch friction faces or your clutch plates. You're going to remove as much locking force as you possibly can from the differential. So you want the diff to be spinning freely as much as possible, because you're always going to have a little bit in there. You can't always take it completely away. So you're going to remove all the preload. You're going to take the clutch plates all the way down to its lowest setting. You're going to do the drive ramp angles and the coast ramp angles to their maximum setting, which produces, as you can see from the tooltip, probably not here because it's covered up by the overlay, the least amount of locking force. The lower numbers are the most amount of locking force. The higher the number, as far as degrees of the teeth and the gears, produce the least amount of locking force. So that's what you do, and then you go out on the track and you run the tightest line through the corner that you can at like 40 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour. And what you end up doing is you end up getting your baseline, such as this. Let me double check and see where this thing was that I ran a telemetry on it. So let me double check. That was yesterday, and this was today. Okay, so the one that's open, okay, so the two that are open are the ones we actually need. So let me look at these. That's not it. Let me look at that. That's it. That ain't it. I think we're talking about this one. And I think we were starting to go in some of these areas here. Yeah. Okay. So what you end up doing is you end up having really, really low differences in your wheel speeds and back. And then what we do is there's a parameter in the math setting where you create all of your own custom formulas, where you can create a custom channel that are on top of the default ones that iRacing outputs as telemetry, and you can take those outputs and then you can put them in different formulas in order to get different kinds of outcomes and output from the car. And one of the things that we do is we take the right rear wheel speed in miles per hour and the left rear wheel speed in miles per hour. That's a default iRacing telemetry channel that it outputs, and then we start taking those two data points, and we start throwing them in different formulas to figure out what the differential is doing. And one of those things that we're going to do is the differential left limit and the right limit. And what we found out during that test is that about 5.5% is normal. Okay, that's a normal amount of unlocking, as far as normal amount of difference in tire speeds in the right rear and the left rear. So that's the baseline. That's what we want. Would be the optimal amount of slip, and we're going to try and set the differential up to give us that amount of slip through the corner, or that amount of locking through the corner. You're never going to get it perfect, so don't beat your head around everything if you can't, by going for ever and ever and ever as far as the differential settings go. And I think this was actually it. Yeah, this was it. This was the test. All right. So we did this test at low speeds, and you can see how much more under control the difference in tire speeds are in the back. And from that, you come down and you can figure out what the average is by looking over here, what the maximum amount of difference in wheel speed was and what the least amount of wheel speed difference in wheel speed was. That's essentially what the differential was allowing to happen. So that's how you get the number that you put into Motec. And then we came out and ran the least amount of locking, just a couple laps, and you can see how much of a mess it is. There's essentially very little locking going on whatsoever. So we just took the updated settings that we put into Motec, and we came back and we looked at one of our last runs yesterday, which was also the last tutorial, and see where we were as far as the setup goes, as far as the differential goes. So we did that, and we came back down to come back in here to the differential. And I don't think anybody actually looked at the video from this morning, but we had a power outage which resulted in my direct drive wheel going absolutely berserk, and it ripped my USB cable, just tore it, ripped it in half. So I had to stop the stream, and I had to go back drive into town and get a replacement USB cable for it. But I had already started this process. So this is where we were before catastrophe struck. We had gone from 8, as you can see in the telemetry, because we were at 8, and then we were still getting both preload flags and entry flags, corner entry flags. So we went from 8 to 10 because we were already pretty low on the coast side of the locking force settings. So we didn't want to go that far. And we were pretty good on the drive, and we went up a little bit on the preload, I believe. So that is where we were, and we were deciding to go out and do some testing as far as how that change worked. So we're gonna do that now, and I think I'm gonna almost guess that the screen just went completely blank because I almost made the same mistake that I did last time. And come here. There you go. All right. I almost did the same thing last time and didn't enable OBS to pick up the full screen of iRacing. So we should be good now. So we're going to go run a couple test laps and things like that. If you're new to the stream, I don't talk a lot whenever I drive, because whenever I do, I crash. I cannot do two things at one time. So here we go. Oh, one of the other things that we did, we went, we were looking at the histogram from yesterday for the dampers, and we made a front rebound adjustment. We went down on the front rebound. So we did those two things simultaneously for this run. And I'm going to talk on the long straightaways. Normally, when we were in the beginning of this process, and you know stuff was way wrong, you can make 3, maybe even 4 changes, because you know they were all going to be positive influences on the car. But now that we've gotten further along in the process, and we're starting to do fine-tuning stuff, you really don't want to do more than 1 or 2 things. And I said the only time they're going to do 2 things is whenever they're similar to the changes that we're doing right now. Like we're changing the dampers, which is black and white, evaluate in the telemetry, and change the differential, which is black and white, evaluating in telemetry. When you start getting into the final processes, like the very last phase of this, like what we're going to end up, like the last thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the ARBs, and we're going to look at optimizing the camber. Those are one at a time adjustment test stuff, because you can't do both, because they both have an effect on handling. And if you want to optimize each one, you have to only change one thing at a time, because you may have no idea which one had what kind of influence on the car. So we'll go and in the order in which I would say to do it is change the camber first and then the ARBs. And the reason for that is because changing the camber changes the amount of grip that you have, which is going to change the handling into the corner. And then you can go back to the RPs and fine-tune the handling that you want into the car. Because you want to maximize the contact patch effectiveness, and you do that using the camber. Now, you can see that I took a different line through that corner. I broke really late, and I really late apexed that corner. And you can do that now because you finally got the car to a point where you can experiment with lines. Before, you're just trying to get the damn thing stable to go around a racetrack halfway decent. And now, whenever you get to this point in the setup process, you can really start focusing in on attacking corners more, being more strategic with your lines through those corners. And then you can go and you can start changing the setup to take full advantage of those line choices. You may need, like at the end of a long straight, you may want the car to turn in a heck of a lot harder than what it's doing right now. And hey, you may change some anti-roll bar settings to try and maximize that. So that's where we are as far as the setup process goes, and how you start going from focusing on the car and the chassis settings to drivers settings and preferences. That was pretty much a normal apex, but I kind of screwed up the entry to that anyway. So I wanted it to, but okay, here we go. Don't slide the tires. Okay, so we go back in and see what we got going on here. We still got a lot of temperature variation between the front and the back. And we really shouldn't. I mean, we have 200 more pounds, or 200 pounds stronger springs in the back than we do in the front. But like I said, it's kind of a mid-engine car. So let's go look and see those two changes that we made with the dampers and the differential, and see how those two changes worked out. So real quick, back to the circular aspect of setups. We've been doing a lot of offline testing, I guess you could say. Like, we haven't been in practice rooms or anything like that. You've just been doing private test sessions. And so you get the car set up to the best of your capability in a private room. And so you're going to go back and revisit the process again, but it's going to be a lot faster whenever you start going out with a track full of other cars, because you're going to be in draft, you're going to be in dirty air, you're going to be pushing the car a little bit harder, because the competition juices start coming in. You start seeing what other people's times are, and you're going to start pushing the car a little bit harder than what you thought you were pushing it in a private testing session. So you're going to have to go back and really quickly start tweaking back through all of the setup process again. But that procedure gets a lot faster and faster, especially after you've been setting a car up for a little bit and you get more comfortable with it. So here's a really good example. The difference between a private testing session and public with the track full of other cars. So you saw in here that we were working on ride heights and we were working on gearing ratios and different things like that. Well, okay, that's all well and good. It works perfect for here. You go out on track with a bunch of other cars. You'll notice as soon as you start going down a straightaway that you're going to be maybe 10 miles an hour faster going down the straightaways. And so the faster you are, the more downforce the car is going to produce, the more the car is going to squat. So you may end up starting to scrape, maybe the rear diffuser or maybe even the front splitter or something along those lines, where you're going to have to go back in and increase the springs to compensate for that. And remember how we were saying, for the most part in general, once you settle on a spring package that gives you dynamic weight transfer balance, you kind of want to stick to that. So let's, for example, say, hey, we're going faster down the straightaways, we're getting a lot more squat in the car, we're scraping the bottom of the car. All right, but the dynamic balance is awesome. So we say, all right, we're going to increase the front springs by 100. We're going to increase the spring package by 100. You increase the front by 100, you increase the back by 100. And that should still keep you in the good ballpark of dynamically balanced car. And then you can look at, so you're going faster, so you kind of have to look and revisit your gearing ratios. And you may have to go a little taller in fourth and fifth gear, which means you're going to have to maybe adjust fourth gear to give you the best amount of torque and acceleration in the gear change between fourth and fifth. So, those are a couple real simple things that you're going to be talking about or revisiting in the setup process between a private test session and a public open room with a bunch of other cars on the track. So, we still got some unlocking when we don't want stuff to be unlocked, especially coming down in through turn one. There's a lot of stuff under maximum braking and things like that. The rest of the time, it isn't bad. The carousel or the bus stop's good. A little bit here. All right, so okay. So let's go look at the suspension and section of the project and look at the histogram. So we're good on the right front. We dialed that in because it was like 27. Now we're 25, and we're 27 to 22 here. So we're still in the same ballpark in the rears. And it looks like all the high stuff seems to be relatively good. So we're going to have to come in and fool around with the left front. And don't kill yourself and bog yourself down into messing with this left front all that much, because some of the high-speed turns are left-hand turns, which means it's lifting the left side of the car up a little bit. And it's getting light, so that may not be 100% accurate, but you still try and maximize this as much as possible. So we'll go back and we'll try and see how that's working. So, and I didn't bring this up. So, here's the histogram. Here's the differential. Like you're saying, right here in the beginning, we're looking at a little bit of unlocking when we don't want unlocking, and just a little through the infield section. The rest of the track is good. Then here's the suspension history, or the histogram. We're decent, pretty good, decent, good. So we're dialing in the dampers pretty well. And like I was just saying, don't kill yourself over 1%. Okay, you know, 26.6, 25.4. That's like 1.2%. Like, don't beat yourself up over that. You'll be here forever trying to figure that out. And that is actually going to change from lap to lap. And if you really want to see an overall average of it, you can open this all up to all of the laps, and then you'll get like a more inclusive picture of how the shock is functioning, because it's going to change from lap to lap. Like I just said, you do it all, you get a bigger average. So 24.1, 24.5, 26, 24, 27, 24, 26, 26. So the rears look really, really good. The front is a little heavy on the rebound and not a lot on the compression. So let's go take a peek at the fronts. But we're already almost all the way to the stops as far as the compression and the rebounds go. So here's something you can look at too. And whenever I say, you know, that there's a little bit of stuff as far as compromise goes, here's something to think of and how components work together. So look here at the spring rate. When you start looking at compression, it's whenever the shock compresses down, okay? And right now what we're at is that we're spending less time in compression than we are in rebound extension. So we're compressing too quickly and we're extending too slowly. Well, this is a coilover suspension, and what that means is that the spring that we have on a particular corner of the car is actually over top of the shock. So if you have the shock cylinder and the piston and the rod and everything like that, and I will show you what a coilover looks like because we run them in a late model, and a lot of cars use them because they're so simple and straightforward, and the geometry is a lot more easy to figure out. But that's why they call it a coilover, because the coil spring is over top of the damper. Okay, so let's think about this for a second. We're at the edges of the stops for the adjustments on the dampers, but we need to slow down the compression. Okay, so we've been dialing in as much damping as we possibly can, higher numbers in the shocks or more damping. But it's not giving us the results that we need. So, gee, what else can slow down and resist compression? A heavier spring, okay? And a heavier spring is also going to want to recoil faster, so which means it's going to help the shock extend faster, which means we are going to spend less time in rebound. So here's where the balance comes in, as far as what not the balance as in the balance of the car and the dynamic balance of the car, but balancing what direction you want to go in. So right now, this is my thought process. We use the springs to get the car lower to the track. If we increase the spring rates, we're going to be higher, okay, off of the track under dynamic loads. So do I really want to do that? Probably not, because if you want to look at what's more important, keeping the car sealed to the track is way more important than 1.5% difference in a histogram for a shock. Okay, so I'm gonna couple more clicks there, couple more clicks there, and there. That's probably going to be what I'm going to end up doing. So we'll give that a shot and see what happens. And then over here in the diff, you can come back real quick and look at the transmission and the differential. And we'll go look at this lap. See, this lap is actually pretty good. This lap's actually pretty good. The only thing that's dealing with this lap right here is the tires may start getting hot, and they're going to start becoming less compliant, and you may get a little more slip. So that could also be in that as well. So the car is still a little unstable on entry, so let's more preload there, and let's bring that down a little bit. And so what are we on the exit? Okay, see, we have no flags on the exit. So let's come out here and, oops, no, that's the wrong one. Here, 50. All right, so no, there. So we want less locking force. So we want to try and find just the boundary between getting 1 or 2 flags saying that the differential is unlocking and locking. So we'll try 70 again, and yeah, 70 seems to be pretty good. So we'll try that again. All right, so once more back into iRacing, another testing session. We'll see how that works out. So this is going to be the last on-track session I'm going to do for the shocks and the differential, because you could really start chasing your tail on stuff and for very little gain. Okay, your return on your investment of time is not going to be a lot. So you have to be cognizant of that. You have to make sure you don't get so fascinated with trying to find, get the perfect telemetry pattern that you waste all of your time and not even examining other aspects of the car that would actually yield you more speed for the amount of time that you're going to invest. So either I'm getting more comfortable in the car, or those last tweaks surprisingly yielded some more speed. So again, for the sake of the length of tutorials, I'm going to leave it right here. Because it worked out better before, and there we go. Nice. I think the preload really helped. wasn't set to off at the time. Boom, new optimal. 141.421 was the lap time. Yeah. For God's sakes, save it. B5. Perfect. All right. If you guys remember, we were 44 and a half seconds or something like that whenever we started this process. The baseline run that we made in the first tutorial was like 44 point something. Actually, let me bring that back up. And I'm going to try and go back and find the telemetry from that. And here, let me get our racing back off the screen, and let's bring up some telemetry, and let's open up some of these runs that we did early on in the process. And let's just do that. Okay. 43.8 was our best lap that we did on the first day of doing this. So 43.8. That was the best lap that we did, and that was just send it, hold on to the seat of your pants. Thank God it stuck. Moderately terrifying experience. So 43.8, and we're down to a 41.4. So that's 2.4 seconds. All right, that you gained. Number one, and number two, it is a much more fun car to drive and much more fun car to experiment with. So, there we go. Okay, so let's try and bring up this last session that we just did and see where we are. I don't think I loaded this last one up, but let's take a peek. Yeah, we didn't load it up because there's no check mark by it. You see how there's a little green check mark? Every one of those green check marks is a run that is loaded in your data over here. So, as you can see, we've lowered this down quite a bit. And then, as you can see, it's starting to just tick every so often. Through the bus stop, I'm not worried about that. Through there, just the initial gas getting back on, I'm not worried about that. That's good, okay? In the grand scheme of setting up a differential, this is good. So, pretty stoked about that. Come look at the suspension histogram. And we honestly didn't do a whole bunch of runs, so it's probably not going to be as pretty. But we're still on the low end of the compression there, or on the rebound side of the house. But, like I said, you can chase this and chase it all you want. And I don't want to dial out all of the rebound in the front, so we're going to leave it at that. But let's start looking at some other stuff that we're going to try and maximize. So one of those things is going to be the tires. And like I said, we're going to do the tires first. And what was this mess? Huh. Okay. So going around this corner, the left side tires. See, there's a lot. That's 17 degrees is a big split. 10 degrees, 11 degrees, still a pretty big split between left and right side tires. So I don't want to go really any lower than that. Another left side corner. So yeah, we're still about 10, 12 degrees, which that split, I'll tell you, in the late model, guys are saying you need a 20-degree split. And some of the numbers that I found as far as your splits on our front tire temperatures, because our front tires are the ones that we camber the most. or somewhere in the vicinity of 10 to 15. That was from Joe's Joe'sRacingProducts.com, and they have some tutorials on that website too for that business, and that's what he was talking about. You know, anywhere between 10 to 15 degrees of temperature split, and that's right where we are. So heck, we may be good to go right there. So we know that all of this is good. We know that this page is finally good for now. Let's start dialing back the brake pressure just a tad, because we still might be getting a little bit of front lockup. And let's start. That's the maximum of that. Let's increase the front ARB just a tad. And what the heck? Oh, there's that. We got steering thing and map setting. That's what we need to. So that's about good. So let's come back and let's test. Let's test a little bit. Just that one little change that we're going to do. See, we made one change. We're going to go test it and see if it's better. And I think I said this before in at least some other tutorials if you didn't catch it. The front anti-roll bar, the higher it is, the more it dials in understeer. Okay? So the stiffer the front ARB, the more understeer you're going to have. The smaller front ARB and the less ARB you have in the front is going to be more oversteer. And it's opposite in the back. So in the back, higher ARB settings introduce more oversteer, and that's on exit. And lower numbers have more understeer on exit. So the front ARB deals with entrance to the corner, and the rear ARB deals with exit from the corner. So come back, make sure everything's all good. All right. So we can test and see this. So let me go into how I set these up. So we set it initially, we set it in the middle, and then everything's in the middle. So 5 and 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1, 2, 3 would be the middle. 3. All right. So we need to dial in more because we want a little more stability on turn-in. So we go 4 at medium. So what happens if that's still not enough? We need to go 5 at medium. That's still not enough. Come up to firm, reset yourself back down to like 2, and then you work your way up until you get the handling that you want. And it's the same way when you're going down. So like if you went down to that, you know, medium 1, and you're still getting too much understeer, all right, let's go soft. 5. Go out and run it. 4, go out and run it. 3, and settle in there. So we were at 3 there. Now we need 4 because I want a little more stability in the front. The rear isn't all that bad. You have to be patient on the throttle, which is these DPs to a T. So, and it's also for winged cars, like real light open wheel cars. Anything that uses downforce to affect handling as much as prototypes and wing cars are. Low speed corner exits are treacherous because you don't have any of that extra downforce pressing on the car to keep the rear tires from slipping. And you still have all the horsepower available. It doesn't matter what downforce you have or not. So people are like, the F1 car is impossible to drive. No, the F1 car isn't impossible to drive. You just have to realize that you just can't go full mash out of a low-speed hairpin turn. You just can't do it. The car's going to swap hands every single time, but you have to be patient on the throttle and let some speed build up, which lets the downforce be generated. But I can tell you what I'm feeling in the wheel. The wheel is much more what I call positive on corner entry. You can tell that there's more feedback in the wheel through corner entry, which means that you're getting some good weight on front wheels and it's balanced and the car's liking what you're doing. So if you've been with me since the beginning of this tutorial series, you will have noticed just there that that is the latest that I had broke going into turn one. The latest. And that's just because the car is set up pretty darn good. And you start making mistakes. But that's natural. The car starts feeling good, you start feeling invincible, you start just sending it. And end up overdriving it. That's fine. You know, you start to learn what the limits of the car is. I mean, not bad. It wasn't as good as that lap that we hit earlier, 2 runs ago, but the car's still pretty good. Missed that. Okay. I want to go take a peek at the rear ARB, because as much as you have to be careful on the throttle and be really, really sensitive with it, we're having to be a little too sensitive. So we can always experiment and see if we can get a setting that we can get a little more aggressive with it. So almost. I don't think that's right. Much more aggressive on the throttle. And you didn't hear the tires scraping or scrubbing as much, which means you're starting to get the balance moving better. Much more aggressive on the throttle. Killed the lap, but it still feels better. So, good direction. There we go. So you can even get a lot more aggressive coming into the pits too, so awesome. Good there. All right, so we're down here towards the bottom end of that, and we made a lot of good, that was a good direction to go in, so I'm gonna go one more down in that direction, and at this point, honest to goodness, I would call this setup finished. V6, done. Okay. So what I would do for this for now is like this would probably be like the week prior to um, the actual race that this would be occurring. So like if week 3 of the season was Daytona Road during the day, week 2 towards the end of it, after I got my soft race in for the previous week, I'd start working on this. So I'd start going to the private testing sessions, work through this setup process, get myself to this point prior to the actual race week. So what you can do is you can do all the heavy lifting first, and then when you're out on the track during the open practice sessions with other cars on the track, you can start going back, like I said, back through the setup process again and start really tweaking the setup more. So you're going to, like just to recap from earlier, when you start getting out there on track, you're going to have greater straightaway speeds due to draft. The handling is going to change a little bit through the corners because of dirty air. Your gearing is going to be needed to be tweaked because, again, you're going to be going faster due to a draft. So those 3 things you can adjust during the week. And then, you know, if you need to change because you're going faster, you need to get a little more grip. Maybe you have to go a tenth of a degree, or maybe a half a degree in one direction or another on your cambers or something along those lines. Or if you want to experiment with caster a little more, have at it. But I would much rather tweak the small stuff during the week than, you know, do so much fundamental setup of the car during the race week. Unfortunately, that's where I'm at right now with the IndyCar, because I really want to do these tutorials, and it takes us up a lot of time. Like right now, it's almost 3 o'clock, and our soft race is in like an hour and 6 minutes. So, we'll call this done. Okay, so that's the setup process. Again, we're talking a 4-part series, probably 6 hours worth of tutorials. Going over and explaining all the different aspects of this, but it doesn't take that long to do it on your own. So especially once you start learning and you start really getting familiar with telemetry and different things like that, you could go through this whole process in 2 hours, 3 at the most, to get yourself to this point. I mean, 2 hours is probably even probably realistic. So, and this process works for every single car. So it's not just like, oh, this is just for the Corvette C7, and I want to go race, you know, like the BMW GT3 or the Ferrari, you know, GTE, and I have to come up with a whole new process again. No, the process works for every single car. Everything that I've explained here applies to every single car on the service. Even aero to a certain degree with oval track cars. You know, we touched on that a couple tutorials ago when we started talking about rake. And so other than that, that is about it. Everybody, thank you so much for sticking with me through all these tutorials and everything like that. This is my first serious venture into setup tutorials, and this one was a pretty big one. It took 4 parts to get it all put together. So again, please subscribe to the channel because I'm going to be doing more specialized tutorials down the road, and I'm going to start doing some NASCAR stuff, and pass this along to your friends, people that you think might be interested in some of this. They may be on the fence about whether or not they want to do open setups in iRacing. Let them know that, hey, I saw some tutorials that really go through it, through the process pretty well. So other than that, I'm going to sign off. I'm going to start getting ready for my IndyCar race, which I'm also going to stream later on. That'll be at 4 o'clock Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Universal Time. So we'll do that. So going to sign off here. Everybody, have a great day. and look forward to seeing you on track. Oh, any feedback, constructive feedback, anything you'd like to see specifically a tutorial done on, message me, okay? So you guys have a great day. Enjoy.